So, our first speaker is Professor Eva Anagnostou-Laoutides from Sydney University. And she's already well known to many in this group for her many contributions that focus on the reception of mythical themes, symbolism, going all the way back to the first world empire of the Sumerians, and so on the one side, and then on the other side, going all the way up into the Middle Ages and the Byzantine Empire. So the work that, well, was kind of her entry ticket into the scholarly work was In the Garden of the Gods, I think her PhD, which appeared in 2017. But I do see on her list that he actually has many other books earlier. But it was the first book that I took note of. So Eros and Ritual is another book that appeared in 2005 and again in 2013. And more recently, she has published books on philosophy, so Eastern Christianity and late antique philosophy in 2020, and later Platonists and their heirs in 2023. And one book that is still under work is very interesting to those of us who are fans of Symposium, namely the history of inebriation from Plato to Landino. So I'm also looking forward to this book being published. Now, Eva is presenting today on a numismatic topic, and the title is Ruling the Center of the Earth, Antiochos I, Babylon, and Marduk on the Omphalos. Eva, the floor is yours. And I make you co-host so that you can share your screen.
Thank you so very much, Altay, for the welcome introduction. Can you see my screen?
So we see your screen, Eva. I do not yet hear you.
You can't hear me.
I see your mic is on. Why do I not? Oh, that is my fault. Okay.
Yes, we can hear her.
Excellent.
Okay. So perfect.
Give me, okay, accept that. Take this bar down. Slideshow from beginning. You may be pleased to know that the inebriation book is going to the publisher on Sunday.
Congratulations.
Oh, I can't tell you how pleased I am after 8 years of writing that thing. But in the meantime, this was an excellent opportunity to try and be a little bit experimental and try an idea in a group that I think may welcome experiments. So let's see how this goes. What I want to talk about today is the myth of Apollo-on-the-omphalos and its adaptation in early Seleukid ideology. Apollo often features as sitting on the omphalos on the reverse of Seleukid coins, starting with the tetradrachms issued by Antiochos I. Can I double check that you hear me all right? Is everything fine? Do you want me to be a bit louder, or is everything all right? Good, thank you. So here are a few examples. If I can make them work. Can I? Yes, I think I can.
Eva, may you perhaps... Exactly, you did it.
That's it. Here we are. So here are a few examples of Apollo-on-the-omphalos issued by Antiochos I. Later Seleukid rulers issued similar coins in mints across the empire. For example, Antiochus Hierax used the Alexandria Troas mint, Seleucus III, the subsidiary mint in Antioch, Antiochus III used the rose mint, possibly in Edessa, the Susa mint, but also the Antioch-on-the-omphalos mint, just like Seleucus IV and Demetrius II during his first reign. His father, Demetrius I, used the Antioch on the Persian Gulf Mint. To start with, however, Antiochus I issued these coins in the East. Sorry, give me a minute. At the Seleucid on the Tigris Mint, and therefore his choice of iconography has been understood to address primarily the non-Macedonian and non-Greek subjects of the Seleucids. The fact that Parthian kings, including Mithridates I, Mithridates II, and Phraates II, replicated this iconography, replacing Apollo with Arsakis, seems to reinforce this conclusion already proposed by Iossif Lorber in 2009 and upheld by Erickson in 2018. And here is a sample on the slide of the coins issued by Mithridates I. So far, the success of this iconography has been explained based on the father-son relationship of Seleukos I and Antiochos, which reflected the relationship of Zeus and Apollo in the Greek pantheon, but could be easily understood to represent the relationship of Marduk and his son Nabu in the Babylonian pantheon. To an extent, this could also explain why, under Seleucus, but more systematically under Antiochus, Apollo was projected as the divine forefather of the Seleucids. I will not repeat the arguments here, but Justin's epitome, where Laodice is said to have slept with Apollo, springs to mind, alongside the tradition about the oracle of Apollo at Didyma that predicted, allegedly, Seleucus' ascent to the throne. The prophecy is reported by Appian, who relies on Hieronymus of Cardia, a court secretary of the Antigonists, who had written a well-received history of the successors. Seleucus' divine descent by Apollo mirrored the tradition of Zeus as Alexander's divine father, but at the same time it appealed to his non-Greek subjects, since the Babylonian Marduk, a god whose popularity had spread in Syria and Palestine already since the Neo-Assyrian period, was responsible for restoring cosmic order and appointing the king as his earthly counterpart. The interest of the Seleucids in engaging with Babylonian religious tradition is well recorded in the Babylonian chronicles of the Hellenistic period, the Babylonian astronomical diaries, the Cylinder of Antiochus, where famously he addresses a long prayer to Nabu in the traditional style of Babylonian kings, and from Berossus's Babyloniaca. In my view, the Apollo-on-the-omphalos motif that Antiochus used on Seleucid coins draws, or at least seems to accord conveniently with Babylonian royal ideology. What I want to do today is unpack this argument a little bit more while addressing some recent relevant views put forward by Majoring and Navotka about the role of the Milesian Demodamas in Antiochus's choice of Apollo as a dynastic god. On a Babylonian boundary stone from the 12th century BCE, Nebuchadnezzar celebrates a military victory with reference to the favor he enjoys by Marduk, the kingmaker god. In lines 6 and 7 of the inscription, Nebuchadnezzar poses as the king of justice, who pronounces a righteous judgment, the strong hero. On line 8, we hear that he bears a terrible bow, and finally that he is the appointer of kings, the prince beloved of Marduk. It was Marduk, we are told, the king of the gods, who sent the king forth to raise his weapons in order to avenge Akkad. The bow of the king corresponds to the formidable bow of Marduk, already mentioned in the Enuma Elish, tablets 4 and 6. Tablet 4. He fashioned a bow and made it his weapon. He set an arrow in place, put the bowstring on. He took up his club and held it in his right hand. His bow and quiver he hung at his side. The bow is also mentioned at the aftermath of Marduk's victory against Tiamat in tablet 6. So I did remember correctly, fine. This is Babylon, your fixed residence. There, we are told, in front of the 7 god of destinies, the Lord Marduk presented his weapon, the bow that is, and laid it before them. His divine father saw how skillful the weapon was wrought and praised what he had made. Anu kissed the bow and called its names before fixing it among the other constellations in the sky. After Anu had decreed the destiny of the bow, he set forth a royal throne, a lofty one even for a god, and set it there in the assembly of the gods. The great gods assembled and exalted the destiny of Marduk and paid their respects. Notably, the Sumerogram Gish-Ban corresponds to the Akkadian Kashtu, meaning arrow, toxo in Greek. In other words, all three words are etymologically linked. Not only was the Enuma Elish widely known across the ancient Near East, with several copies of it surviving down to the Hellenistic period, but importantly, Babylonian kings were often represented in the image of Marduk, that is, as holding their trusty bow. See, for example, these are the names of the bow before Marduk acknowledged that this is the symbol, before Anu acknowledged that this is the symbol of Marduk. So here are a few representations of kings and bows from the ancient Near East. Let's see what we have here. We have the stele of the Babylonian king Marduk Nadin Nahe dating in the 11th century. And then the trend of the king with a bow continues down the Neo-Assyrian period. We have similar representations from the reign of Assurbanipal II or his heir Salmaneser in the 9th century, and also a relief from the time of Tiglath-Pileser III down in the 8th century BCE. In other words, associating Marduk with Apollo and royal supremacy did not demand extraordinary acumen or even an elaborate master plan on behalf of the Seleucids. Indeed, Apollo's bow would suffice for the non-Greek subjects of the Seleucids to make the connection between the fully clothed Marduk and the naked athletic Greek god who now wielded the bow of power in the region. That the Seleucids were able to make the association between the bow as a symbol of royal supremacy and Apollo from early on agrees with Erickson's suggestion that Antiochus struck already during Seleucus' lifetime, that is when he was his co-ruler, his father's co-ruler, gold statters at Susa and a Bactrian mint, featuring the head of Apollo on the obverse and Artemis in an elephant chariot on the reverse. Here are a few examples of that coin type. As Hoover noted in his review of Erickson, so far we have been unable to explain the impetus for this type of coins, essentially a modification of Seleucus' regular Zeus and Athena in elephant chariot type. According to Hoover, it may be no coincidence that Susa, probably the originating mint, was the cult center of the Elamite goddess Nanea, who was syncretized with Artemis in the Seleucid period and whose cult certainly reached Bactria. Nanea, however, was equally powerful in Borsippa and was worshipped as a bearded Ishtar in Babylon, as she tells us herself in a hymn published by Reiner already in 1975. While, however, iconography is important for us to appreciate the level of syncretism that was bound to take place during the Seleucid period, Antiochus' choice did not rely simply on superficial similarities. As I have suggested before, under the Seleucids, Marduk was syncretized with Heracles as well as with Zeus. For some time now, Van der Spek has pointed out that the Greeks worshipped Zeus at the temple of Marduk in Babylon. Even Herodotus in the 5th century presented Darius as asking Zeus's support to vindicate the Ionian Greeks and their allies, that is the Athenians, for their conquest of Sardis. He did so in a prayer while aiming an arrow at the sky. Equally, at the palace of Tiglath-Pileser III at Hadatu in Syria, we see soldiers carrying bows and clubs, which the Greeks would immediately associate with Heracles. And of course, Heracles had often favored the bow as his main weapon in several of his labors, and he was known for killing the lion, a favorite activity, a favorite pastime of Near Eastern kings. So why Apollo and not the obvious candidate, Heracles? Moreover, why Apollo-on-the-omphalos? Or, to put it differently, what is it about Apollo-on-the-omphalos position that made Antiochus keen to associate Marduk with Apollo? In tablet 5 of the Enuma Elish, Marduk describes his temple as follows. I want to build a house to be my luxurious abode. I will establish in its sanctuaries. It will be the center of my kingship. I will call it Babylon, temple of the great gods. Babylon, identified with Marduk's temple, the ziggurat at Emenanki, was perceived as the counterpart of the heavenly sanctuary Eshara, that is, a vault in the sky that housed a divine sanctuary. Esarhaddon, therefore, celebrated Marduk's temple as the palace of the gods, the mirror image of the Apsu, the counterpart of Eshara, the replica of the constellation of the field. Etemenanki means house, foundation platform of heaven and underworld. Its most famous representation, surviving in the so-called Babel stele, was built by Nebuchadnezzar II, a king known to the Seleucids and admired by the Seleucids, certainly by the time of Antiochus IV. Furthermore, as the place where Marduk defeated Tiamat and subsequently established his kingship, Babylon was believed to be the center of the world, as this map held at the British Museum indicates. The idea was reiterated in the Enuma Elish, tablets 4 and 6. The head of Esagil, image of Apsu, was raised. They built the high ziggurat of Apsu. Furthermore, he measured the structure of Apsu, the Lord, and as a sister sanctuary, he founded the Eshara. This was created in heaven. He installed the chapels of Anu, Enlil, and Ea there. Marduk's temple, and by extension, Babylon, was understood as the meeting point of heaven and earth, hence the center or the navel of the world. Again, in Enuma Elish 5, we read, he molded heaven and underworld their bond. He designed his rites, fashioned his ordinances, put the bridles, and had Ea take hold of them. Interestingly, Ishtar is also known for handling the cosmic cable in a hymn published by George. She, we read, alone is to grasp the bridle of heaven and underworld. Or, as Bolio put it, the temple of Marduk was the focus on the meeting of heaven and earth in Babylon ideologically as the center of the cosmos. Later speculation viewed the ziggurat at Emenanki as counterpart of the heavenly sanctuary Eshara, confirming the role of Babylon as nodal center of the axis joining the underground world to the firmament. Even into the time of Cyrus, the idea of Marduk in Babylon and the importance of the idea of divine dwelling therein became the basis for the rhetoric of Achaemenid expansion into southern Mesopotamia, as attested in the Cyrus cylinder. To this city he caused him to go. He made him take the road to Babylon as a friend. And who is this who did all of that? Cyrus, king of the world, great king, king of the four quarters. Also note that the basic principles of the Babylonian world map were followed by Anaximander and Hecateuch, both citizens of Miletus, in the 6th century, when Ionia was already under the cultural sphere of Babylon. Before, however, bringing Miletus into the discussion, it becomes obvious where I want to take the argument. Apollo, sitting on the omphalos, is a concept very close to Marduk taking up his residence in Babylon. In the Greek tradition, Apollo's battle with Python takes place at Delphi, the Greek center or navel of the earth. Python is represented as a snaky monster, as its name reveals, the same way Tiamat is. To illustrate the similarity, I'm showing you two images. An early representation of Python from the Louvre and a representation of Tiamat as Marduk's Mushuku dragon from a Neo-Assyrian cylinder. Note that in the early tradition, including the Homeric hymn to Apollo, the python is female, just like Tiamat. While in Antiochos I, the western capital of the Seleucids, the local myth that talked about Zeus taking on Typhoeus or Typhoon was preferred. In the rest of the empire, Apollo's myth fitted better the processes of cultural interpretation. The omphalos was also perceived as a kind of anchor, an expression reported by Plutarch, but allegedly going back to Democritus. The concept agrees well with Seleukid ideology in the sense that the king who controls the omphalos offers his subject an anchorage to preserve their lives and safeguards their prosperity. The final argument I want to explore today is the association of Miletus with Apolline ideology, or the Apolline ideology of the Seleucids. Apollo had a special connection with Miletus, as evident already in the Homeric hymn to Pythian Apollo. Furthermore, as we know, the Seleucids claimed from early on a special connection with Didyma and Apollo's oracle there. The sanctuary of Didyma was administered by people from Miletus. Accordingly, Majoring and more recently Navotka argued that the Milesian Demodamas, an officer of the Seleucids, was the mastermind of the Apollo-on-the-omphalos iconography favored by Antiochos. We know that Demodamas was sent by the Seleucids as a military official to oversee the northeastern borders of the empire in the 290s. He wrote a memoir about the lands and peoples of the region between the Aral Sea and the Sir Daria River. The memoir served as a major source for later authors such as Pliny the Elder. Demodamas, we are told, was especially devoted to Apollo and kept raising altars to the god during his travels. During his lifetime, nevertheless, Seleukos, we know, systematically rehearsed a special connection with Zeus. Therefore, in the temple of God in Dura Europos, he is represented as crowning a god whose iconography led us to believe that should be identified with Zeus. The relief is late, dated in 100 to 159 CE. Also late is an inscription from Lydia, discussed by Navotka, addressed or dedicated to Seleukos, son of Zeus, and the nymphs who give grain. In his view, the connection is already anticipated in our earlier evidence, including this inscription from Seleucia Pieria, dated in 193 to 175 BCE, that talks about Seleukos, son of Zeus, the Nicator, and associates Antiochos with savior Apollo. According to that, or based on this, Navotka suggests that, it seemed as if the two heads of the Seleucid Empire split between them, the gods, Seleukos always claiming a special connection with Zeus, therefore allowing Antiochus to be more closely associated with Apollo. But this categorization doesn't always seem to work perfectly well. Furthermore, I don't think that dividing the gods in this way would require Demodamas or anyone pointing out to the Seleucids how they should do it. In Pausanias, for example, we are told that Seleukos returned the statue of Apollo, which the Persians had removed to Didyma, a tale that echoes the removal of Marduk statues from Babylon, both by Sennacherib and later by Xerxes, and its subsequent return to the city by new rulers who tried to appease the Babylonians. As I just said, the division of the gods between Seleukos and Antiochus is not as clear-cut as we would have liked. Or perhaps seems to follow local traditions or the people's expectation more than a master plan devised by the Seleucids and their cunning advisors. In addition, while the Milesians were clearly devoted to Apollo, who had predicted the destruction of the city by the Persians, the god is reported as not helping the Milesians on this occasion at all. Why would then Seleukos or Antiochos want to be associated with a god who had allowed the Persians to plunder Miletus, unless this Milesian Apollo was not just a local god, but the god who dispensed royal favor across the region, a god that had already been syncretized with Marduk? The last thing that I would like to bring to your attention is this. A few years ago, an important representation of the omphalos was discovered in Rhodes, dedicated to Erythemius Apollo. The omphalos here is decorated with the agrinon in the very traditional Greek way, the net-like woolen cloth that is often placed on top of it. But it is accompanied by the representation of a lion, which points to Near Eastern artistic patterns, or perhaps it even represents a lion skin. According to Papachristodoulou, who published the inscription on the monument, we should also add next to Apolloni and Artamiti and to Artemis, and assume that another lion head was represented at the other corner. Ross suggested that probably this is a representation of Apollo-on-the-omphalos, where Apollo is represented partially naked, holding his cloth and carrying bows and arrows. The representation was very popular already in the 4th century BC coinage, such as on issues like this. During the 3rd century, this motif appears on coins of several cities, including cities in Epirus, Acarnania, Macedonia, Thrace, and Crete. Gavalas suggested that on several of these coins, Apollo was replaced with Heracles, because the latter had already been syncretized with Near Eastern deities. The increasing association of Apollo with Heracles during the Hellenistic period, especially vis-à-vis the role as protector of kings, was also reflected in a hymn by Callimachus, according to whom Zeus replaced Apollo with Heracles as the gatekeeper of the heavens. The Seleucids then, while entertaining this trend from time to time, overall remained steadfast to the traditional, let's put it in inverted commas, association of the omphalos with Apollo. But this did not need Demodamas or the undeniable close connection to Miletus that the Seleucids enjoyed to shape their policy. Apollo, already keen to cede his prized position on the omphalos to Heracles as a protector of the king, did not offer the Seleucids just a special connection to Miletus, as has been suggested recently. It offered them a special claim to Babylonian kingship overall, which at the time meant global kingship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva, for your excellent presentation. The floor is now open. Well, yeah, with applause. It's a little difficult in our hybrid environment, but you hear that.
I do.
So the floor is open to discussions, questions, suggestions. While everyone else is still thinking about a question, I seize the opportunity to ask back. I wasn't sure whether I was following you precisely on Demodamas, who is clearly the link for the Milesian side and can also be connected to the Iranian side because he's attested of campaigning there. Did you also argue for Demodamas engaging in any way with the Babylonian tradition, which is so strong, as you have shown, even stronger than Kyle Erickson had been arguing. So you have added so much to this Babylonian side. And I'm not sure whether I missed part of the argument here. Who is most likely to have brought these pieces somehow together? You may have...
What I'm trying, this is a very good question and goes right at the heart of the argument, poking exactly where I'm still trying to refine the argument. But what I think I'm trying to argue is that the connection of the Babylonian tradition with the Apollo-on-the-omphalos was so obvious and strong that the Seleucids did not need the Modamas or the Milesians to point it out to them. That's what I'm trying to say, that there is no Demodamas as mastermind that kind of led the Seleucids in their decision. After all, Apollo, the favorite god of Miletus, did not help the city when the time came for the Persians to plunder it. So why actually side with a god that allows his favorite city to be ruined?
Okay, I think Niklas is... Niklas, I mute myself and you unmute yourself, then... Oh, okay. Can you join then either Pim or me so that you use one of our microphones? Well, then come over to our side. Otherwise, Eva will not hear you. So Niklas Verhelst is now contributing.
No, I'm just not as convinced of kind of this Babylonian connection. I mean, I completely agree with this connection with Marduk, but the question I would ask is Marduk still as strong? Is Babylon still as strong at this time? Because the material you refer to mainly comes from Neo-Babylonian, Neo-Assyrian times, and this is a long time ago. So especially during the Persian period and then certainly the late Persian period, the centrality of Babylon disappears. I mean, certainly if we look at the Hellenistic period, like a city like Uruk, for example, it has no strong connection to Babylon anymore. They have their own pantheon with Anu at the top. And the same thing of whether or not the Greeks would understand the centrality of Marduk or even Nebuchadnezzar. For example, if we look at the Greek literature, if we think about these great empires, it's mostly King Ninos or Semiramis, which is a far stronger Neo-Assyrian connection, which is to a large degree separate from the Babylonian tradition. So I'm wondering whether this Babylonian idea of Babylon at the center of the world, whether this was shared by the Greeks, understood by the Greeks, or whether it was even understood by people beyond this very much a small, increasingly small priestly elite.
Thank you for the question. I don't think that we should be asking whether the Greeks would understand it, because the Greeks would see Apollo-on-the-omphalos. The Greeks did not need to understand anything about Marduk. The people that were to understand Marduk behind Apollo were the Near Easterners, the native subjects of the Seleucids. And I think that these had been sufficiently immersed in the tradition for too many centuries to miss the connection. And this is what I'm trying to say, that every time we're dealing with the Seleucids, we are always asking, yes, but would the Greeks understand that? Who cares? Why do we care so much about the Greeks? The Greeks were very happy with their Apollo. The problem is about the rest of the people who still had to pay taxation and their respects to the Seleucids. So I totally understand what we are saying, that Babylon at this time is not particularly strong. Seleucus himself contributes to that because he chooses to build his capitals in different directions. And in many ways, he is responsible for the decline of Babylon. But the tradition and the ideology is still there, which is why Antiochus IV, centuries later, is trying to make a statement by wearing a Babylonian king's robe. If that gesture carried no meaning, then obviously he wouldn't have done it. So I guess this is what I'm trying to say to you, that behind every capital, there is another one. There is a tradition. Yes, the Greeks are now the rulers of the region, but they have to follow in the tradition of the region's rulers in a way that makes sense to the people around them.
So, because there, would then the omphalos, in this connection to Marduk, would you see it more limited to Babylonia or also Persia and Syria?
I think Syria and Persia was well familiar with this idea that the god who establishes his temple at the center of the earth is the one that appoints the king.
And I assume then mainly building on kind of this, what is it, this relief in Palmyra, which has been interpreted as Enuma Elish, or kind of through these connections.
Sorry, I didn't follow that argument at all.
No, sorry, mainly thinking about, because I assume then you're mainly looking at kind of this evidence from later early Roman times as far as reliefs and onomastics goes, if kind of see this connection between Syria and Nabu, Marduk, or do you establish it another way?
I think that the region was conquered. Syro-Palestine was under the cultural influence of Babylon for quite some time. Already, not just the Neo-Babylonian region, not only the Neo-Babylonian period, but even before that. Ideas travel even when people are not the rulers of the region. Here we are, centuries later, still talking about the Greeks and their legacy, but the Greeks are not ruling the world anymore. We know that for sure. The ideas, however, that they planted in those regions are still very influential. The same way I think Babylonian ideas were circulating in Syro-Palestine already from the 7th century BC downward, without even people appreciating them necessarily as particularly Babylonian, but just as part of the local tradition, part of the cultural fabric in which they were raised.
Yes. Just a colleague of mine in Münster is currently working on this Aramaic literary tradition. So I think it might be very, very useful here, because it is within the Babylonian tradition, but it really differentiates from it at a certain point already in the 7th century. So it's based around the same stories, but still it's quite different.
I would be more than happy. I mean, feel free to write to me, as I'm trying to make this argument as watertight as possible.
Thank you. I wonder if there are other questions in the Melina, would you? Melinda. Now, Melinda Ho from Utrecht.
Hello, thank you so much for your interesting lecture. I'm very happy to hear about this this idea of the king and the bow. And you talked a lot about the Babylonian background, but perhaps I missed it, and I'm really looking forward what you have to say about this, but do you also connect this with the Agamemnid idea or the Agamemnid portrayal of the king with the bow on the derricks, and how it also interplays with the Parthian portrayal of the king with the bow on the coins of Arsacid I already?
Yes, I already showed a few, one coin where Arsacid was represented instead of Apollo as sitting on the omphalos. I can't remember if he held any bow, but I'm sure there are other coins where this iconography is represented. Well, clearly, the association of the bow with kings is widespread in the ancient Near East. We see it in the Achaemenid tradition, and many people begin with the Achaemenid tradition. That's where it's most prominent, which is why I was showing you Babylonian sources today to indicate that it's even earlier than the Achaemenid tradition and very compatible with it, in the sense that when the Persians conquer Babylon and pose as Babylonian kings, they really don't have to try all that hard, because the only thing that changes is the name of the god, the king god of the pantheon. But everything else seems to be falling into place. It's a very powerful ideology, and one that can easily translate across the cultures of the ancient Near East.
And if I may
Yeah,
ask
sure.
if I may ask a follow-up question, the meaning of the bow, I'm not sure if I followed you correctly, but does it have something to do with the royal hunt? Or, and
Yes.
this is where my interest comes from, in early Arsacid coins, it might have something to do with nomadic heritage. Do you also discuss?
Nomadic, you said?
Yes. Do you also discuss this in your argument?
No, I don't discuss nomadic. I'm not sure if at the time of the Parthians it acquired new meaning. I think in the context of my presentation, the bow that the king holds represents the divine bow of Marduk, the divine weapon of Marduk. By holding the god's weapon, the king automatically acquires some of the strength, the ability, and the favor of the god.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, your last comment, if invites another follow-up question. Would the local Babylonians have regarded the holder of the bow as Marduk, or actually as the king holding Marduk's weapon? And another question connected with that is, it always bothers me when we look at this coin, which is so accessible to the Greeks to understand, well, yeah, of course, Apollo is a god, he's naked. But it's so offensive, I think, in the Near Eastern tradition, and even gods are not represented naked normally, as far as I know. So there, I think, is at least a big tension. So the two questions combined, how it's not just about the bow and the arrow, but also the holder. Who is he, and how may he have been perceived as someone naked in Babylon?
Okay. Let's talk about the bow first. I mean, judging for ancient people is always difficult, but I think to the extent that the king of gods is the one who appoints the mortal king, that would lead me to think that the arrow-holding king is simply someone showered with divine favor by the god, not a god himself. That would be my first reaction to that. And I think it would be one that the Greeks would swallow better. Now, the point that you made about the nudity of Apollo on the coins is a very valid one, and one that makes me think hard about it. Because for the Greeks, of course, it would point to heroic nudity. I haven't checked, but even if Apollo has some kind of cloth, holding some kind of cloth on the coin, it doesn't make much difference because you have a fully nude Heracles on every other coin. You got me thinking, Altay, here. Yes, it's something that I need to think harder on. I don't know how offended the Near Eastern people would be at that time, that they would find it unusual and certainly not part of their own cultural fabric, 100%. But whether it would be offensive in the way that we would perceive it nowadays, with all the monotheistic background behind us, I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. I think unless there is any other urgent questions, we'll leave it at that, but not without thanking you once again, dear Eva.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and your comments. And I do apologize if I disappear. I would normally stay. I'm a very, you know, my stamina is really good, but I'm traveling very soon to the States, and it's going to be a 16-hour flight, and things are a little bit all over the place, which is why I may disappear soon from your screens.
Okay, and so that is why we appreciate even more that you well presented to us and have been with us. Thank you, Eva. Until the next time.
Thank you.